happens in our lives is that we have our own picture of what life is going to be and how life is going to turn out. And then all the pieces of our lives are thrown down to the ground and we're putting it back together again.
Life has a way of taking us down roads we never expected, some filled with pain and others with beauty. But often it is both. Today's guest, Bambi Lynn, knows that journey well. A 3-time published author, life coach, storyteller, and a mother of 6 adult children, and a grandmother to a growing tribe of over a dozen grandchildren. She has lived through broken roads, heartbreaks, and healing. But through it all, she discovered this truth. Our trauma isn't a death sentence, it's a survival guide. Bambi has shared her story on over 200 podcasts, on stages, and in her books, inspiring others to see rejection, pain, and darkness as places where transformation can begin. She believes stories are medicine and that healing comes from when we share them with honesty and hope. From creek walking and driftwood beaches to finding strength in the mountains, travel and storytelling have become her way of embracing joy in the middle of life's mess. Bambi, welcome to Positive Vibes.
Well, thank you. I don't think I need to even talk the way that you wrote that. That's amazing.
You're most welcome. No, you've got a lot more talking to share with our
Oh.
listeners here today, Bambi. So just on that, Bambi, you've described your life as walking a broken road that led you to healing. Can you take us back to the crossroads? What was happening and what shifted for you?
Oh my goodness. I think like all of us, there's many different crossroads. There's many different forks in the road. We just have to make the decision. Do we want to stay in our trauma or do we want to take the other road less traveled, and to find that hope and to find that endurance and to find that healing in taking a road that nobody else has gone on. So I think for me, it's been a process. It's, like everything, it's like a roller coaster. I even tell my clients, I said, when you are in the valley, remember that the valley is where there are creeks. The valley is where there is tall grass that we can lay on. And remember that there is trees for shade and for fruit is within the valley. It's because the valley is preparing us for that climb, that you need that preparation for that climb. And then you take that climb and you're digging your way up to the mountain. People think when you're going, oh, the mountaintop experiences, but they're not understanding what it took to get to the mountain.
Yeah.
The bravery, the loss of oxygen, the loss of water. You're dehydrating, you're digging, you're climbing, you're trying to lift your weight in to get to the top of the mountain. But then when you get to the top of the mountain, after you've been in the valley, because the valley prepares you for that, and after you've climbed up that mountain and you sit and you look at the horizon and you have finished, and after you've sat there for a while and after you've embraced it and after you have thought, wow, I've arrived, you then think, oh my goodness, I got to get back down that mountain. And that's what life is like. We are a whole bunch of valleys climbing mountains, mountains climbing down valleys. And we do this, the cycle is over and over and over again. And that's what healing is. And when you think that you've already healed, another layer is presented to you. And what are you going to do with this other layer? It's kind of like the peeling of an onion. What are you going to do with this other layer? Are you going to allow yourself and allow the healing to take you back through the valley, up the mountain, and to the horizon?
Wow, I really love that analogy. It really resonated with me, and I'm sure it's going to do the same to our listeners out there. Just the way you described that, and it's very similar to how I think it's growth begins where comfort ends, and all that is around getting out of your comfort zone and the ups and downs and the tributes that happens along the way. So you've
Absolutely.
raised 6 children as a single mum and now have a house full of grandchildren.
I
How
will have 15 I will have
Oh my
15
lord.
grandchildren by 2026.
Oh my lord, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
One is in
amazing.
heaven. One is in heaven, aggravating all the great crowd of witnesses and,
Mm.
and aggravating and playing tricks, but, he's still, part of my counted 15.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just because they're not here, they are with us, within our soul and spirit. So, how has family been both a challenge and a source of healing in your story?
Oh my goodness. I came from a very broken childhood.
Mm.
My first book, The Journey of Josephine, is about how a broken little girl, went on a journey and how God took this broken little pieces of my life and he helped me go through that with a rag doll, which was my security
Mm.
blanket throughout my life and the destruction that trauma does, and I think that I started when I go to an event, I started asking the women when I'm on the audience, I started asking questions, I started going through the different things that are trauma in our lives or the different things that bring brokenness. And one thing that I noticed is that when I ask a question and I ask somebody to stand up if they've experienced this, after I've asked all the questions, I realize that everybody's standing
Oh.
because everybody has been through something in their life. It's a universal thing. It's not something that only the poor go through. It's not something that only the rich go through. It's not something that only the Christian homes go through.
Mm.
It's universal. The thing that's not universal is that I'm finding is healing because a
Mm.
lot of people love to stay in their brokenness because partly they don't know what to do, they don't know how to live outside of their brokenness. And so God took me on a journey that I had to find my brokenness and I had to deal with that brokenness. And, I became a young mom. I was 16 years old when I became a mom. And
Mhm.
at that time, I had a life that was broken. And I tried to commit suicide, not knowing that I was pregnant. And then I gave my life over to the Lord. But then I had a total of four daughters, four children before the age of 22 years old. And then I
Wow.
had my twins at 28. I had identical twin boys at 28 years old. And I wanted to do so much better. I wanted to have my home be so much better than when I grew up, but I found out even with my own children, I have six children and I do have two children that don't speak to me.
Mm.
But I have four that do and I have two that don't. But I have children that had said, Mom, you made everything a performance when we were kids because I wanted them to sparkle when they walked into a room. Because when I
Mm.
walked in the room, nobody liked my sparkle. And I wanted to make sure my children had that sparkle. So I went to the other extreme,
Yeah.
of parenting, and I think that there's a time, and I think that we're in a society like that today. We're such an extreme, and there will be a time that there's a pendulum, that will come back into the middle and will meet us in the middle because we parented and we raised our children what on how society told us that we're supposed to raise our children, how the world was raising their children, and how our parents were raising their children. We weren't doing it, in a mean way or thinking, oh my goodness, I can't wait to
Mm.
ruin, six lives. But then we live in a society that is a totally different parenting. So they don't understand our parenting.
Mm.
So that brought a lot of brokenness. And
Yeah.
I just continue to journey on. I just continue to lay it down and just I got burned. I tell
Yeah.
people this. I got burned when I was like 24 years old. I had a pressure canner blow up on me. And what they do when you have a pressure, what they do when you get burned, they take you to the burn unit and they put you on a metal bed and they tie
Mm.
your hands and your feet and they jack you up with morphine and they start scrubbing the residue and the dead skin off of you. And I tell my clients and I tell the people that I speak to, the reason why I tell you that story is because that's what healing is like. You got to get rid of the dead skin. You got to get rid of the residue in order for the new skin to grow on healthy skin. And that's not always easy.
No.
That's hard. That's
Mm.
hard. That's looking in the mirror and finding your mistakes and then forgiving yourself. It's falling down to the ground and crying yourself to sleep at night because, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to be better? How am I ever going to be
Mm,
something that's worth having a conversation with?
yeah.
Being healed and set free, and that it's not my death sentence. I had to first forgive myself to think
Mm,
that all the stuff that happened to me had anything to do with me because
yeah.
it didn't. It
Yeah.
had not a darn thing to do with me.
Yeah.
And that was a hard thing to realize that.
Yeah. And just in regards to what you said before, where you're in a room asking people about, going through hurt and problems, and everyone in the room was standing, but not everyone knows how to heal. Is because a lot of people don't want to go to that because it hurts so much and don't know how to deal with it. So they just push it down. So yeah, it's very resonating to hear you talk about that and your journey through it all. So just on your journey, what role did writing your memoirs and books play in your own recovery and growth?
It was, years ago when I was 28 years old, I had a dream that I would walk on stage and that I was going to share my testimony on what had happened in my life. And as I looked out into the audience, everybody looked homeless, and there was a stench in the room, and then there were words written across their chest: unloved, ugly, nobody wants me, second class citizen. And I started continue to share my story. And as I continued to share my story, I smelled the scent of lilacs, and lilacs is one of my favorite scents. And I looked out into the audience, and people had started changing. Their clothes had started changing. And then new words were written across their chest: beloved, set free, blessed,
Yeah.
I'm whole. All the words that we should be speaking over into our lives. And that was when I was 28 years old, and I'm 55 now.
Mm.
And so that was a lot of praying. There was a lot of preparation. It was a lot of saying, God, did you forget about me? I really want to write my story. And my birthday is January 8th. So, which is to me is really cool. It's the first month of the year, and it's the eighth day, which eight means the number of new beginnings.
Mm.
So every year I would go to the creek or I would go to water, and I'd say, is it time for me to write my story? Have I healed enough? Have I been set free enough? Has the brokenness of my life, do you still see the residue? And finally, when I turned 52 years old, I had moved from Western New York to the Golden Isles of Georgia, which is in the South. And I went to this place called Driftwood Beach on Jekyll Island. And I came home and I saw my doll sitting on my bed in my guest bedroom. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I began to start writing.
Mm.
And I wrote my story it took me 3.5 weeks to write my story because it took me 53 years to live it. And I
Mm.
remember when I got my book in the mail, when we published it, when it went through the editor and things like that, my book came from Amazon because I self-published it. And I sat all night long and I read my story, and I cried. I healed some more. I cried again. I was in a fetal position for some of it, and just wretchedness, and just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe what this little girl had gone through and how she had overcome.
Yeah.
And then after I was done reading it, I looked up to heaven and I said, you know what, God, this isn't me anymore. But now I want to find her.
Mm.
I want to find this woman that needs the bravery and the courage to write her own stories. And that's where I came up healing through stories, is because I knew that God had healed me through my story. And now it was my responsibility and my obligation and my mission and my duty is to find those women and to lock arms with them and to help them write their story and to tell their stories for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful story. Pardon the pun, but yeah, it's a gorgeous way of understanding how you believe sharing your stories matters so much, and how getting them out of you and telling them, in the pure honesty, can heal you within and actually release you from what you've been holding on to all that time. So that's truly amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Then I wrote, that was the journey of Josephine. And then I wrote The Treasures of My Heart, which was
yeah,
a book that It was about finding the treasures within the midst of the storms, because they're all going to have storms. We are all guaranteed storms.
Mm.
But if you think about it, and I have my clients like make a train track, in front of me, and I say, good and bad run on the same track. So what bad things happened to you in your life? And they would write that down. I said, okay, but now let's look what good thing came out of that.
Yeah.
I was a victim of domestic violence, but in the midst of that, I also have beautiful identical twin boys that I would have never had.
Mm.
I have a life, a different kind of life that I would never have if I didn't go through the storm. So the treasures of my heart are the different storms that I went through, but the treasures that I found in the midst of them. Because
Mm.
it's like an oyster. An oyster, there's not a pearl inside of an oyster until the oyster has gone through some stuff.
Yeah.
And so the oyster has had parasites and sand and hurricanes and the waves and the winds crashing over it.
Yeah.
And then when we find the oyster and we open up the oyster, we see a pearl. And the size of the pearl is the amount of damage and the amount of storms that oyster had gone through. But
Mm.
it created something beautiful. And that's what happens in our lives. If we can begin to start looking at it, and that's part of healing. I can't change what happened to me, but let's find some good, out of that. So
Yeah.
that was the treasures of my heart. And then I, for 20 years, I had a desire and a passion to continue to write about women in the Bible and to write their stories in the way that it was raw, not write their stories as if you're reading it in the Bible and we're skipping over it, but reading the stories and realizing that in the Word of God, there are women that went through domestic violence. There's women that went through rape. There's women that went through poverty. There's women that went through the loss of their children, adoption, having their kids taken away from them. All of these stories that I wrote about, and I wrote them as if God was speaking to us today,
Mhm.
that we needed to know that these women survived and these women thrived, and that God had a plan and a purpose for their lives, and that we weren't left alone in the midst of our storms, but He even gave us women to tell their stories to us so we can find healing even through their stories. So
Mm.
that was my God, the God who sees. My
Yeah.
favorite book.
Wow, I love that connection that you've made, going back that far. But I also, have to pick up what you said there before in regards to what you do with when you're healing others is getting a train track and writing down the good and bad because it's on the same track. Because often we separate them as they're separate things, but you're so right in that aspect that life is one track and we go through good and bad. That's yeah, a real, yeah, lifted a spark within me when I heard that. So just on that with your clients, what has it been like watching others open up to heal after hearing your story?
It is it's like aha moments for me too,
Mm.
because it really shows me that I am doing what I was called to do. Last year I had lost my job in last October, so it will be a year in October that I had lost my job, and I'm like, I'm 55 years old and I didn't want to just be in a corporate world anymore. Anyhow, I
Yeah.
didn't want to just be a 9 to 5. So I've had to re-identify, I've had to recreate, my life, and to see the clients, because what I do with my clients is that I send them a box, and that box is full of activities and full of projects that we're going to do together. So
Mhm.
I had a client yesterday that we had our one-on-one conversation yesterday, and I had her put together a puzzle, and as she's putting together the puzzle, she's realizing that the pieces in this puzzle aren't the same that's on the cover of the puzzle box.
Yeah.
And I said, "How did that make you feel?" She goes, "Well, it kind of confused me because I didn't have any direction. I couldn't have anything to look at." And I said, how about if I told you what happens in our lives is that we have our own picture of what life is going to be and how life is going to turn out. And then all the pieces of our lives are thrown down to the ground and we're putting it back together again. And that picture has nothing to do with what we thought, but it's still a masterpiece. It's
Wow.
still something that is important, to you. And she's like, I guess I never thought about it that way.
Mm.
So we could take our lives. We all have it. We all have preconceived ideas. Even us as little girls, we're going to grow up to be mommies. We're going to grow up to be wives. Or, we're going to make really good dinners, and we're going to come in and if we were raised in the 50s or whatever, our husbands are going to see us in these 6-inch stilettos. We have it all figured out. But then life happens. We
Mm,
lose babies. Divorce happens. Tragedy happens within our household. But are the puzzles just as important to what we imagined as what is happening in our own lives? They're just as important.
mm,
And so that's her week. That's her homework for the week, is to
mm,
take her thoughts and how she thought the moment that she's putting together this puzzle, and it doesn't look like what it's supposed to look like, but it's still pretty marvelous.
mm. That's quite profound, but so pragmatic. What you've said there, like it's just, yeah, that just hit me when you said that in regards to what the puzzle that we think that we're putting back together is something that is completely different, and we're not responsible for it. Yeah, that's amazing.
No, and I just have all these different ideas that I
Yeah,
send to them, and they put into, there's one exercise that they write down the traumas that hurt them, and
yeah,
I send them bubbles for them to blow the bubbles and watch them pop
mm,
and watch them go away.
yeah,
Simple, but yet they'll never look at a box of, a bottle of bubbles the same way again.
yeah,
And I'm just a word oriented person and such a picture oriented person that I
yeah,
need to see it. So you will never look at a puzzle the same way again.
mm, yeah,
You'll never look at train tracks the same
yeah,
way again. And that's the purpose, is because that's why I say to people that our trauma is not our death sentence. That's our beginning.
mm,
That's the beginning of our lives. That's the beginning of putting the tools inside of the toolbox and putting the salve and everything inside of the first aid kit. That's the beginning. Because I read a book by Viola Davis, and I tell people all the time, if you want to know how to deal with your own trauma, read other people's traumas,
mm,
read other people's memoirs, and you'll understand that, wow, mine wasn't that bad. And but when I read Viola Davis's, hers was intense. It was such an
mm,
intense thing. But there was a scene in her book that she talks about how she went to her counselor, and her counselor said to her, Viola, stop going back to the 8-year-old little girl because she survived for you. Stop
mm,
going back and taking her back because she already went through it all. That 8-year-old little girl survived and conquered everything so that you could live today. Stop going back to her. And I was like,
yeah,
that's what it's like. The only time that we should be looking in the rearview mirror is when you're seeing the blessings and the treasures that you receive because of the pain of your life.
yeah,
You should never look back in the rearview mirror and think, oh my goodness, this happened to me, because guess what? It's happened to everybody.
yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I often say to people, stop going back and talking about what happened, because you got built bringing that negative energy into your space again, and you're not releasing it. You need to step forward and look forward. But yeah, absolutely resonates with me what you've just said. So for someone that's afraid to tell their story, what would you say to them?
I would say to first tell their story of them inside of a mirror.
Yeah,
Lock yourself in your bathroom, tell your story, or go to a beach, or go to a creek, or go to the woods, or do something and speak your story out loud,
yeah,
so that you can be comfortable in the fact, because sometimes we don't want to speak, our story. I know that there was an incident in my book that I'd never told anybody, of what had happened. The detail, people knew, but the details of what happened. And at first it was humiliating, like, oh, do I dare like tell that? And then I realized it was a release, that I no longer had to keep that secret in my mind anymore, because now it was already out and I was okay with that. So I would recommend people, not necessarily even writing your story. I mean, sometimes people go, oh, write your story down. I just think speak it. And if you don't want to speak it to anybody, speak it to yourself. Speak it to yourself, that you become comfortable in your own skin about
mm,
what has taken place in your own life. Then I would tell women, forgive yourself, because everything that had happened to you had nothing to do with you. I was sexually, abused as a little girl. It was not my fault that my grandfather came into my room with naked with a bathrobe, and I was 4 years old. It had nothing to do with me. Why am I carrying the guilt of something that had nothing to do with me? And
Mm,
if women have to repeat those things out loud, you know, do what I do with my clients. Take a bottle of bubbles and speak it and blow it out. Speak
mm,
it and blow it out. Find tangible ways that you can do something that gives you back your voice.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely love that bubble idea. Just blow them away, get them out of you. But I just want to touch on something that you said there before is you often hear people say you've got to journal it, you've got to write it down to get it out of you. But I'm a true believer. I'm not a big journaler myself, but I believe when you speak your truth and with true honesty, it shifts the energy from you as well. So yeah,
Absolutely.
love that you
And I
have
think
that.
and I think that sometimes people, because who wants to write it?
Mm,
Not everybody is a writer. And so to
no,
demand them that they have to write is, also will stop their progress.
yeah, yeah,
Give people all different alternatives,
yeah.
to be able to, and that's a difference between a therapist and a life coach. A
Mm,
therapist sits on the couch and tells you to go through all of this and to talk about it and, to write it down and everything. And a life coach takes you to the fork in the road and gives you tools for either fork. We give you these tools. We don't tell you how to do it, but we give you these tools to be able to do it.
mm,
And if somebody can't write, but they can speak, if I speak into my phone, a lot of times,
yeah,
and I stopped journaling for so long because I had an ex husband that found my journals,
mm,
read my journals, used them against me, and then burned them.
mm,
So if you have that trauma, but the counselor is telling me you need to write, you need to write, you need to write. Well, I have a fear of writing. So why am I going to write? But then my healing's not going to continue because now I'm not going to write.
mm. Yeah,
And healing should be continue because you should be able to also speak it. You should be able to find ways. You should be able to write it on a on a puzzle piece and be able to put the pieces together. Like
mm,
that's the other thing I do. I give my clients like I bought these puzzles that had nothing on them and let them draw their lives and then put their lives back together again. There's other ways to healing besides
mm.
journaling.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all very different, made up with different DNA. Things will resonate differently to each other. So I think to hear that there's different ways and of modalities to heal it really will resonate with a lot of people out there. So you often remind people, don't allow life to take your joy. How have you held on to joy even in pain?
That's so funny because I've taken a challenge to do 100 videos that I have to do. And today, actually, and it was about my brand. I had to do 100 videos about my brand. And it could be, I have a YouTube channel that just started that my grandson did for me, and podcasts, being guest on podcasts. And then I'll do live on I will do live on Facebook. And I talked about that today, my brand, healing through stories. What is another way that you can heal through stories? And I say laughter.
Mm,
Laughter is the best medicine. So it's funny that you brought that up because that was what I talked about today is laughing at yourself, laughing to the
mm,
point that your stomach hurts and you want to pee your pants. The greatest people that you can laugh with are your grandchildren.
mm,
The mistakes that you make, I spend a lot of time by myself because I'm single. And so I laugh at myself in the car. I laugh at the things that I used to do. Just recently I went to Alaska. I drove with my daughter and her family to Alaska. So it was 5,500 miles. And I've never peed outside, ever. And I had to. And when I was driving to Alaska, and now I'm in my car and I'm laughing at myself hysterically because, sometimes you just got to take life and take the lemons of life and make the darn lemonade, and don't be so stiff. that you can't laugh, because laughter is the greatest medicine. So find ways. I tell some of my clients too, I'm like, they're like, oh, I just have a bad day and everything. I said, shut all your windows, shut all your shades, take off your clothes, turn on the loudest music you possibly can, and run around your house. And they're like, what? Like, just do something like out of the ordinary, that when you're sitting in your car, you can laugh about it. Why do I want the past to take away my joy? I have a lot more years to live. Why should my past continue to dictate, my future? Why should it be able to
Yeah.
dictate, who I am and who I'm going to become? I'm a traveler too. Like, I travel. I have only 2 more states to travel before I reach all 50 states in the United States.
Mm,
And I tell people to find something that is just, you think it's beyond reach. I was a single mom. My girlfriend reminded me this yesterday. She goes, Bambi, you did most of this traveling on nothing,
yeah.
like on nothing. And I said, I know. And I can't believe I only have 2 more states. I have Oklahoma and I have New Mexico. So I'm heading that way at the end of next week, because I'm doing an event, a woman's event. And I bought a t-shirt. I had a t-shirt made up for me, and I brought balloons and everything. Do something out of the ordinary, that at the end of life, it actually becomes extraordinary, because I realized not too many people have done 50 states.
Mm, no,
That's pretty amazing to not do
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. And it's really about bringing your inner child out, and being playful and enjoying life and laughing at yourself, as you said. Yeah, absolutely. So, can you share a personal story where joy surprised you in the middle of something hard?
Ooh. Let's see. There's so many, because
Mm,
I've just taken life and made it, just joyful. Just recently, I said, when I said I went to Alaska, and I drove my grandchildren in my daughter's car, and they drove their U-Haul. And then when we got there are 3 deadly highways, in our country, and one of them is the Dalton Highway, which
mhm.
that's where the truckers go, and they're on the in the winter they're on the ice.
Ah, yes,
Well,
yes.
my
Yep.
so my grandson and I wanted to take my grandson to the Arctic Circle. And that road, it was dirt road all the way through. It was a 16-hour, trip. It was dirt roads, potholes and everything, and our brains are like being,
Mm,
rushed around. But to hear the joy of my grandson, going around and telling everybody that he met that my Nana and I are the adventure ones of our family. My
mm,
Nana and I are the ones in our family that we go on adventures. And can you pray for my Nana? Because I'm going to live in Alaska. My Nana's going to live in Georgia, and we're not going to be able to go on many adventures anymore.
mm,
You take those moments, and you create those moments for everybody that's around you. My
mhm,
goal in my life is that whenever anybody is in my presence, I want you to feel sparkled.
mm,
I want you to feel, when you walk away from me, wow, that was an amazing experience. I
mm,
don't want to be the elephant in the room that brings people down. I want to bring the elephant in the room that brings people. I
mm,
want them when I'm having a tea party tomorrow at my house with 4 other women. And my table is set to the hilt. And there's party favors, and there's teapots, and there's teacups, because I want these women to know when they leave my house how important they are. That life isn't just about me, that life is giving to the other people around you. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how I live my life. Is
yeah. And just
I don't want you ever to feel that you got left out.
Yeah, and just on that, in regards to how you want people to sparkle when they walk away, the way I look at life is if you shine, the people around you will shine as well. So it's around the positivity of your energy and lifting others up just through you shining, you will lift others up as well. So, just touching on something that you talked about before in regards to the use of your powerful metaphors, you touched on the pearl light, the pearl formed through pain, or the butterfly confined in darkness. Which metaphor speaks to you most deeply right now?
Mm. I would probably have to say, because I am a metaphor person, because, like the eagle, there's only one bird that irritates the eagle, and that is the raven. And the
Mm,
raven will get on top of the eagle, and he'll eat at the back of the eagle's neck. But what the eagle does, the eagle doesn't, try to get him off. The eagle doesn't fight, doesn't do anything, but the eagle keeps going higher and higher until the raven can't breathe and the raven falls off itself. And when I think about
mm,
that in my own life is, I've had some hard lessons that I've had to learn. A lot of my life I've had to walk alone. A lot of my life I'm plowing fields, and sometimes I'm being mocked for the things that I believe or I don't
mm,
believe, or I won't engage in certain things. And I've realized that an eagle can survive alone. And if anything hits that eagle, the eagle just keeps flying. Doesn't like I don't need to tell you. I don't need to like feed you my opinion and the way that I believe over and over again. All I got to do is keep flying up. And then the rest of the people in my life that don't necessarily agree are just going to fall off.
yeah.
So, I love that metaphor, but I do love the metaphor of the butterfly. I think that everybody needs to understand that when I think about a monarch butterfly, because one of these days I'm going to write a book about the correlation between the monarch butterfly and Christianity and how they correlate so well together. But
Mm,
when a monarch butterfly gets impregnated by another butterfly and lands on the milkweed, when she lands on that milkweed, that egg is landed on that milkweed and that egg is a butterfly,
mm,
doesn't change. It's a butterfly. But when it is born, it goes through some stuff. It's kind of like my life. I've gone through trauma. I've gone through, my dad and alcoholism. I've gone through single parenthood. I've gone through domestic violence. As the caterpillar is going along its path of its life. But then after a while, after the caterpillar has gone through so much in its life and it's eaten itself up and it's ready to blow up, it turns into a chrysalis. And the
mm,
chrysalis is where that caterpillar, where that butterfly is told over and over again, you're a butterfly, Bambi. It doesn't matter where you've come from, Bambi. You're a butterfly. It doesn't matter that somebody used and abused you, Bambi. You are a butterfly. And if you look at the chrysalis of a monarch butterfly, there's a crown that is around the top of that, but the top of the chrysalis, because I am the daughter of the king. But I had to be reminded over and over and over again until I finally get it, until I finally look up to heaven and I say, yes. And then the chrysalis bursts open, and the butterfly now has the wings to be able to fly.
mhm,
That's the metamorphics of our lives. If we could
mm,
just look at our lives that way and we could just see that, yes, I'm sorry. So much stuff has happened to you. I am sorry. I'm sorry that you walk through what you walk through. But I'm telling you, if you just accept what has happened and you walk through and you learn the lessons from it, you're going to fly to be able to tell the next person and the next person after that and the next person after that. And then you get to write your story and
yeah,
you get to heal through your story. And then you're bringing other people alongside of you.
mm,
That's amazing about
yeah.
life.
Yeah. And just while I was listening to you on that, something that was popping into my head about the butterfly is the butterfly never sees its own beauty.
Never
So,
sees its own beauty.
yeah, 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 one to take home. So, how can someone listening today begin to see their trauma as a survival guide instead of a life sentence?
I just think that they have to acknowledge it. They have to acknowledge that they're sick and tired of being sick and tired of being in the pit and being left in the corner and being the one that people start walking away from. You've got to start there. It starts with you finally rising. It starts with you saying, I'm sick and tired of being the one in the room that's talking about all my dirtiness and everything that's happened to me in my life when everybody else has found joy in their
Mm.
situation. You got to be sick and tired of being sick and tired, or you're not going to. You got to be willing to strip yourself off, strip that t-shirt off of you and say, no more will I wear this t-shirt that says, hi, my name is Bambi and I'm full of trauma.
Mm.
Get rid of the t-shirt and be willing to get on the bed of healing and be willing to be allowed to be scrubbed and to
Mm.
get the residue and the dead skin off of you so new skin can grow. But it starts with you. I can't change you. All I can do, I have friends in my life that are struggling with things in their lives, and I just tell them, I can't give you the answer. It's kind of like a woman with domestic violence. We tell them, why do you stay? Why do you do this? You need to do this. You need to do that. Until she makes the decision for herself, what we should be doing is loving her through the process.
Mm.
I should never be trying to tell her what to do, but I should love her no matter what decision she makes,
Mm.
because that's what you need for healing. That's what you need to be set free. Because that poor woman, I'm going to speak at this. I'm going to be on a panel of advocate for domestic violence because, next month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month in October. And I want the narrative to change. I want it to be, stop asking these women why they're staying. Stop asking these women why they're doing this, why they're doing that,
Yeah.
and start asking the correct question. Why did he have the right and feel like he had the right to hit me in the first place, that I even had to
Mm.
make any kind of these decisions?
Yeah.
That's the narrative that should be talked about,
Mm.
not why does she stay. She stays because she's a woman. She stays because our estrogen is created for us to have empathy. And we try everything we can do to try to keep things together. That's why we
Mm.
stay. We stay because of our children. We stay because we don't want to be in a homeless shelter. That's
Yeah.
why we stay.
Yeah, you're so right. Healing is about just holding that space for someone to share their story, and you listen, not listen to respond. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. So, you've already shared some quotes with us today. Do you have a favorite quote or mantra that gives you strength?
Well, I used to love the quote, and and I forgot who wrote it, but I want to plant seeds under trees that I will never sit under.
Mm,
And I
that's
think that
one.
that is such an amazing quote. Plant
Mm,
the seeds under the trees you will never sit under, but
yeah,
keep planting them because somebody else will sit underneath them.
yeah.
Make a difference because somebody else will need the difference that you're making.
Mm,
Even if you feel like your life isn't mattering, and it is, people are watching.
yeah,
People are watching, and they're like lurking around, your life, because they're seeing how you're going to handle things. So plant seeds where you're never going to sit.
yeah. And that's a beautiful act of kindness for others as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've spoken about your grandchildren. Can you share a joyful memory that always makes you smile?
Oh my goodness, with all my grandchildren, they're like my oldest grandson is 15, and I had the opportunity to watch him be born. I had just turned
No?
40. Um, and so I have 15 grandchildren under the age of 15. And things that tried to take a lot of my grandchildren on trips by themselves. We got into the car and taken trips. And that has been some of the most amazing things. I remember my grandson Jonah, that he's my adventurous grandson. We were on our way to Colorado, and we were just sharing about Jesus and how Jesus comes in and he washes your heart, and he makes it white as snow. He takes like a scrub brush and he washes your heart. And that evening, my grandson woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, shaking me, saying, Nana, Nana, I ate a chocolate bar. How long is it going to take for Jesus to scrub off that chocolate bar? You know, out of the mouth of babe, like
Mm,
just those moments. I write journal. I have four of my grandchildren that they have journals at their house, that every time I go visit, I write them a letter,
mm,
so that they will have their letters when they get older and grow up, and they'll have the wisdom from their nana. There's all these different things. I have one of my granddaughters, her and I have a scrapbook together, that our scrapbook is only pictures of her and I together and we call it Charlie and Me. You
Mm,
know, there's so many things that you can do. And I've learned to just live life and to
mm,
enjoy life. I remember my son told me, you know, that he was singing to one of his sons and he was singing the song, the Bible. You know, that's the book for me. I stand alone on the word of God, the Bible. And my grandson put his hands on his hips. He goes, "You can't sing that song." He goes, "Why can't I sing? That's only Nana's song to sing." You know, so we you think that our grandchildren aren't watching us. They're listening to every single word that we do and every single action that we have. It's not about buying them things. It's about building those memories that and those adventures
mm.
that they will have for a lifetime.
Yeah, you're so right. Because my memories and some of my best memories are with my grandparents, and I held them up on pedestals. And yeah, so you're so right in that respect about grandchildren looking up at grandparents in that way. Yeah.
Yes.
So, Bambi, where can listeners connect with you, find your books, or learn more about your coaching?
You can. I am on all kinds of social media. You know, Bambi Lynn. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I am on TikTok. But that is on TikTok. It is our. It is healing through stories, and then Bambi. I do have a YouTube channel. That is our story 555. I also have a website, healingthroughstories.com. You can also find my books on Amazon. They are on Amazon and they will ship them to you. So and you can email me, josephine.rstory@gmail.com. So if you want to go out there and find me, you know, I'm definitely easy to find. But if you go on Amazon to try to find me and you find my books and you look up Bambi Lynn, just know that there's two Bambi Lynns. One of the Bambi Lynns, she writes exotic Renaissance romance.
Right, completely
I
different.
don't. I don't. So that's how you can find me. You know, I would love to connect with your audience and I would definitely love for people to, especially my third book, The God Who Sees, because I want people to understand that our stories were written way before us and we have
Mm.
people to glean from.
Yeah, I'm sure our listeners will be looking you up and reaching out to you for sure. And if someone listening feels right weighed down right now in pain, what's the first piece of encouragement you would want them to hear?
I would say that they are a hero in their own lives.
Mm,
Stop looking to see things from the left nor to the right and start looking straight ahead into the mirror and see that you have survived, you have thrived, you have gotten up today and in the morning. You are your first hero. Put on your superhero cape and put on your crown and fix it because you don't want to walk around tilted.
mm. Great advice there. And thank you for sharing your story and your heart and your beautiful energy with us today. You've reminded us that pain doesn't have to steal our peace. It can lead us to deeper strength, greater joy, and a life we've never imagined. So thank you for joining us today, Bambi.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. And to everyone listening, your story matters. Don't let life take your joy. Embrace the messy, I should say, not the message, but the message might be in the messy. Share your joy and believe that healing is always possible. This is Positive Eyes with Nicki Dennis. Until next time, may you walk with hope, live with joy, and remember that even in the broken places, beauty can bloom. Sending you all love and positive vibes. Bye for now.